Hello there everybody, welcome back to another HP GameLINK video. My name is Matt and today we're going to be talking about a top 10. We've been talking about doing this for a little while now. The time has finally come and unfortunately this is the first video in a little while where I don't have my junior gamer here because she's back at school. That's okay though, we're going to get her working on some other videos, got some other things in the pipeline for her as well. All things considered, if you are liking what you're seeing and you're liking what Charlotte is putting down, then by all means let us know and we'll see if we can get her to start her own series here on our channel. Today though we are talking about the top 10 deck building games. Now this is my own personal opinion. Obviously there's lots of different games that are out there that use the deck building mechanic. Now for those of you who don't understand what the deck building mechanic is, that is where you start off with a core deck of say 10 to 12 cards that generate resources which you can then use to complete other actions, whether that be purchase other cards for your deck, thus building the deck, or using those to attack, etc., that sort of stuff. So I'm not talking about games where you get, you know, like Magic the Gathering where you buy boosters and then grab cards and then draft a deck that you can then build that way. I'm talking about the specific deck building mechanic. And of course this is my own opinion and my own interpretation of my top 10. By all means I have differing opinions on other games, so you are welcome to disagree. Without further ado, we're going to jump straight in with my number 10. At number 10 is one of the first deck builders I ever played. It is definitely not one that is my go-to when I'm demonstrating what a deck builder is. It is one of the more simpler deck builders that are out there, but at the same time there's a slew of expansions for it as well. Some great artwork on the cards. It is based on a comic franchise, and no, it's not what you're thinking of. Yeah, we'll see whether or not the other ones get higher on the list. This is, of course, the very aptly and adequately named DC deck building game. Now, it's literally a game where you get a set of core cards. There's 5 heroes in the core box, and you take the fight to the villain stack and ultimately work together to defeat the villains, and then you count up your victory points, and whoever has the most victory points wins the game, which is similar to a few other deck builders which may or may not be on this list. The artwork's great, it's very simple to understand as an entry-level deck builder. Yeah, pretty good, but at the same time it's not necessarily the one I would bring to the table if I wanted to introduce people to the genre or to the deck building mechanic itself. Having said that, great artwork on the cards, great IP. I mean, the DC stuff in the universe is still quite good. And I think the expansions for this one that allow for Teen Titans, and then there's a core box expansion that allows you to play as the villains attacking the heroes, which I like as well. So you can create a Joker deck, for example, and go to town on Batman, which is very, very cool. So I think it still earns its place as one of the forefathers, I guess, for the deck building genre. It's still quite playable and still quite enjoyable to this day. Okay, so number 9 on this list is only in the 9th spot simply because, again, of its simplistic nature and because of the point scoring or scorekeeping system, which I just simply do not like. It's too fiddly. Having said that, it is still a great game with a lot of different factions that you can utilize, and that is Star Realms by White Wizard Games. Now, this is a game that was designed by some MTG players, and it is set in obviously far reaches of space, and you can take control or draft cards, purchase cards from the market from 4 different factions. Obviously you have faction bonuses that come into play, which is something that wasn't seen in many deck builders until Star Realms came about. It utilizes a slew of expansions, huge amount of content, lots of replayability, but the original game had these scorecards for your authority or your health, and unfortunately they were just so clunky to maneuver around. If you had to maneuver 20 to 10 to 5 to 1, they were double-sided, and then it just became an absolute mess when you're trying to play a heads-up 2-player game. God forbid you're looking at doing a 6-player 3v3 combat mode game of Star Realms, because it just became very, very clunky. Having said that, again, Very, very simple to understand. Great as an intro level game if you're doing a one-on-one instructional video of how to play a deck builder. Very good for that. It isn't higher on the list for a number of factors, including, of course, as I said, the scoring system. The artwork on the cards is okay, but look, still something that holds a nice place in my heart. Preceded only by my number 8. Now, my number 8 is the spiritual successor to Star Realms, and that is, of course, Hero Realms, also by White Wizard Games. Why do I like it more than Star Realms? I think I like the theme better. Nothing wrong with being a sci-fi nerd. I just think that the content and the core theme of Hero Realms as being a bit more fantasy based is quite cool. The idea that again, there's expansions, a campaign mode as well, which is great for solo play. There's also something they've fixed from Star Realms, and that is these scorecards. There's 2 cards, and you will literally just layer them up. So instead of having one card is your 10s, the other card is your 1s, and you will literally use those to go anywhere between 1 to 100 and something if you need to. Very, very simple, very, very clever, and a lot less faffing around on the table with the scorecards, and you don't have to use pen and paper, which is very good too. Having the ability to use champions to act as guards, as opposed to in Star Realms where you have bases. The champions stay in play until they're defeated. They can do attack, generate resources, similar to what the bases could do, but they have the ability to be tapped for resources as well, which is very, very cool, and one of the reasons that I prefer Hero Realms over Star Realms. Hero Realms also had the individual character packs you could get, Thief, Cleric, Wizard, Ranger, and those had individual customized hero cards, but they also had unique spells and abilities that were specific to that character class. So you might have a character that would start on 40, whereas if you have the Thief starts on I think 50 or 60, and you can mix and match those to take on some of the bosses. There was also 2 blister pack bosses that you could get, Dragon, the Lich Lord, and they obviously could be played by other players as well, so you could actually be the bad guy and take on a whole bunch of heroes too, which is very, very cool, and just added a bit more of a dynamic to the games. So that's why Hero Realms is my number 8. Okay, my number 7 is another game that has a slew of expansions. It's been around for a little while. Another one that was just been designed by some Magic the Gathering champions, and that is number 7. My number 7 is Ascension by Stronghold Games. Now this is one that sort of it was one of the forefathers again of deck builders. And the whole idea was that the heroes of the realm had gathered together to try and fight off monsters and discover who amongst them was the most honourable, was the most worthy of taking the fight to the villain of the piece, whose name eludes me at the moment. Not Salem. Salem, something like that. Anyway, the big bad, the godlike enemy. So you would gather the most points. You would gain points from defeating monsters. You would gain points from acquiring cards for your deck, and ultimately whoever the most total points wins the game. Again, this is probably one of the games I would bring out to the table to teach the deck building genre. It is a wonderful, wonderful game. The later editions, the artwork on the cards has become much better. Chronicle of the Godslayer, the newest edition, I think it's in their 3rd reprint now. Is very, very simple, very cool. The artwork's great. The interactions between the cards is great. There's always something you can do, and there's not a huge amount of downtime. Some deck builders, you can be sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting for someone to play cards and do things just so I can get back around the table to your turn. Ascension plays very quick, and while you can pad out the game with expansions and things, majority of the games last about 30 minutes, 35 minutes tops, so you can get a good couple of rounds in should you be absolutely thumped in the first round. It is something that hits a table on a quite a regular basis, has a great little solo mode as well, which is nice. And again, with a lot of expansions that can add to the game, add to the competitive nature of the game, add team elements as well. It's one that will hit the table for a long time to come, and that is my number 7. Okay, so my number 6 is one that I love. I absolutely love this game. It hits the table a lot. More often than not, though, it does hit the table for solo play, not so much with other players. And I'm not quite sure why that is. It could just be because I don't have a lot of players who want to get involved with deck builders. But it is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle by the OP. This is something that it introduced something different to the deck building genre, which a few games have adopted since. But this is something that was truly special, because when you open the core box, the way it's packaged, the way it's presented, the quality in the production is outstanding. When you open the box, you're greeted to 7 other boxes. And there's little treats inside each of those boxes that you have to work your way up to. So you can't open box 2 until you've defeated box 1, and so on. They delivered an expansion, the Box of Monsters, which has another 4 mini boxes inside, of which I'm only up to box 2. But the core idea of it is the 4 characters or players work together to defeat the big bad of that particular film. So if you think of the Harry Potter franchise as books, not as films, as books, you work through the books in order up to book 7, which is of course defeating He Who Must Not Be Named in an epic confrontation. It does scale reasonably well, obviously. However, the more players you have, the more difficult it is. That's not to say it's an easy run through solo. It is quite a challenge then, because you don't have the cooperative aspect. It's literally just you against the world, unless you're playing 2 decks, which is obviously something that we've done on a regular basis. The quality of the components, as I mentioned, is great. The IP works for what they're trying to do with the deck building mechanic, being able to acquire Dumbledore in your deck and other heroes and characters from the Harry Potter universe, along with items as well. The Marauders map is in there. The Invisibility Cloak is one of the first items you'll come across in the game, and being able to use that as a resource, but to also bypass monsters that you might otherwise have to fight, is a fantastic way to sort of bring you into the universe. And something else that's really good about Harry Potter per se is that it allows you to play cards to help your fellow allies in the game. So you can play cards which generate resources for other players before their turn comes around, so they start their turn ahead in terms of generating influence, etc., or damage tokens they can then assign to the villains that are in play. And that is, it's a wonderful game by the OP. It's definitely worth a look. There is a reason it hasn't ranked higher on this list, and I will go into detail with that as we move forward into the top 5. Alright, so moving in from the Harry Potter IP into one of the staples of the deck building genre now. This has been around for a while. It is into the top 5 of these. Some people will argue and say, no, you're crazy, this should be number 1. But again, this is my opinion. Number 5 on my deck building list is Legendary, and this is Upper Deck, one of the Upper Deck classic Legendary games. It's the original. It is there's probably 2 on this list that sort of explored what the deck building genre could actually be, and this is one of those. Apart from being set in the Marvel universe, which gives them access to some incredible artwork off the bat, the cooperative aspect of Legendary was something else that was a nice feature. So this is a game where you pick your core group of heroes and you take the fight to a mastermind. But in the core box there was, I think, 5 heroes, including Iron Man, Captain America, etc. And you would take your choice, or you would elect a supervillain, and they would be mastering some sort of scheme. But the schemes were all interchangeable. So you could have Red Skull doing his best to acquire the Tesseract, etc. But then you could have Loki doing something else, and then intermingle all the different storylines. And in the midst of this, you've got bystanders that come through the deck. Other villains that would be dealt into the villain deck and cause trouble for you while you're trying to thwart the main scheme. And you would have to not just thwart the main scheme once, you would have to thwart the scheme 4 times before you were successful. And then ultimately, while it is at its core a cooperative game, there was a victory point scenario as well, so that once the game was over, provided that you had defeated the mastermind, you would add up your points and there would be a winner as such, which I didn't really like for the theme. But the core mechanics of the Legendary game paved the way for what deck builders are currently. It's still one of the best deck builders that you can get your hands on. There are iterations of it that have evolved the legendary style and legendary system since then. The legendary core box I think now has about 30 different expansion packs that you can get for it that add in huge amounts of content, heroes, champions, villains, all that sort of stuff as well. So there's heaps and heaps and heaps of options. The base game of Legendary is a little bit pricey for what it is, but I think at the same time the replayability and the intermingling of all those different villains and schemes and things is, I think, is what gives it that value. Definitely worth a look. If you haven't played Legendary, by all means grab a copy and get into it. It can be pretty hard to come by now because they're currently out of print. I think they're working on a third reprint or third edition of the game. So yeah, definitely worth a look. If you have someone or you know someone who's got a copy of Legendary and you've always wondered, get them to bring it around, break it out, and have a go because you will love it. It's definitely worth a look. Okay. So my number 4. Now this is another one. Some people are going to be like, "What are you doing? You're crazy. It should be number 1. What's wrong with you?" This is arguably the grandfather, the deck building game of our time, and really showed everybody what a deck building game was. It was sort of an introduction to the genre across the board for a lot of people. The rulebook, even of the big box edition and printing, reads as though you've never heard the term deck builder and don't understand what it's talking about. It really treats you as though you're literally a novice when it comes to exploring these genres. But my number 4 is Dominion. Now Dominion is a game where there is no cooperative element to this game. It's completely free for all. You are a noble and you are trying to acquire the most lands, the biggest provinces, and all manner of merchants and other things as well. Amass the most wealth, amass the most points, and therefore win the game. The beauty of Dominion and the Dominion big boxes is that it's completely customizable. You have 10 stacks of cards that you can buy from, plus money, plus lands, and you have your core starting deck of I think 7 coppers and 3 estates, and you'll use those coppers to acquire more cards, better your deck, do hero actions, cause trouble for your opponents, throw curses around, all that sort of stuff as well. But the core box had something like 800 cards in it, or something like that. Maybe it was only 400, maybe it's the big box version that's got the 2 expansions included, I'm not sure of the exact specifics. But the fact is that you can use any of the 40 different types of cards to make up that 10 core group. Means that the replayability and the strategies you will adopt will change from game to game, and no 2 games will ever be played the same twice. What was really great about the big box expansion that was released in 2017 is that it came with a core deck of cards, one of each of the core groups of cards that you could shuffle up and deal to randomize the 10 sets that you played with for that game. And that went across the base game and also the Intrigue expansion, so you could mix and match between the 2 expansions, which was fantastic. It also included sets for up to 6 players to play as well. And now, waiting around for your turn to come around, not a lot of downtime because of the fact that there were people who were actually being able to play attacks against you and things. You had to be on your toes, paying attention to what was going on, and so midway through someone else's turn you might be required to start playing again and trashing cards and transmuting copper into silver into gold and so on and so forth. The artwork on the cards is okay, but it's not about that. It's about the core gameplay of Dominion, and Dominion for me is still one of my favourites. I've actually played it on my own purely so I could see what different cards how they would behave, and how the different core sets would interact with each other, how the different cards that are in the game, the stacks, would be able to be played off against each other, working out strategies and things in order to best my opponents. Dominion is a fantastic deck builder. If you have heard of Dominion but never played it, I can highly recommend it. It's definitely worth getting to the table. Doesn't require a lot of space, so you could set up a big game of 6 players on a relatively small table, and literally smash out a couple of games. And again, that 40-minute playtime, which is quite nice too. And for a big box, I think the big box is retailing a little over $100 at the moment. But at the same time, if you're ever interested in Dominion, it's worth just going straight for the big box, because you get all that extra content as well at a fraction of the cost as to buying the base game and then the expansion separately, and then the base cards add-on separately as well. Dominion, to me, is still something that hits the table on a regular basis. It is definitely worth a look, and yeah, I know some people are screaming at me right now saying, "You're kidding me, it's amazing, it should be number one." But for me, there's a few other games that have just implemented the deck builder a little bit better in my opinion. And again, these are my opinions, but now we're going to move into the top three. Okay, so my top three. Number three on this list is personal choice, only because I'm a massive fan of the theme, and there's only a handful of games that have attempted to do this. There's plenty of games that have attempted to do this and mess with this theme and mess with this IP. But there is only, in my opinion, 2, maybe 3 games that have actually smashed it out of the park and really encapsulated the tension of the theme and the IP that this is associated with. Some people will argue that this shouldn't be here, and it's actually an expansion. I beg to differ. It is a completely different mechanic setup and different game design. The initial opening of the box when you set it up and try and dig out the cards can be an absolute nightmare, so please look up on the internet and YouTube obviously to see how that breaks down, because it can get a little bit confusing and you may think you've lost some cards. What am I talking about? I am talking about Legendary Encounters, an alien deck building game. Long title for a very deep, immersive deck building experience that will literally kick your ass so many times before you even get close to that taste of victory. The Legendary Encounters games are specifically themed to a specific IP. There's a multitude of ones available, but this one is one of my personal favourites. You get 4 Alien films, Alien, Aliens, Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, all in the one box. You get a plethora of heroes and characters to play as. You can acquire different heroes. There's about 14 different versions of Ripley from across those different films in this box. There's also different hazards, there's different objectives that you have with each film. You can mix and match objectives, so objectives from Alien can be paired with objectives from Alien Resurrection and things, just to mix it up. The replayability and the scalability of this game makes the tension. So unlike other Legendary games, the cards aren't turned up from the villain deck, they're kept face down, and you have to work your way through the different complex and scan ahead if you want to know what's coming before it appears in the combat zone to kick your ass. Which means you have to spend resources that you would otherwise spend to potentially collect cards or do damage to what's in the combat zone. The very first game, Alien, which is based on the Alien film, one of the hazards is the self-destruct sequence of the ship, and if the self-destruct mechanism makes it into the combat zone before you've defeated it, and it requires a ton of resources to defeat, it literally explodes, causing you to take massive amounts of damage and can pretty much destroy your chances of winning the game. There's been so many times where we've drawn that card and it's just cost us so many different wounds and damage points, and some of the characters only have 5 hit points, some of them have 11. There is a secret objectives or a secret agenda mode where you can give each card a secret agenda, which means that one of the players may or may not be working against you, a la Aliens, where Burke comes into play and obviously is working for the company rather than for the people that he's boots on the ground with. Legendary Encounters, an alien deck builder, is amazing. The expansion for this particular game allows one player to take on the role of the alien queen and literally take it to the rest of the players. It plays 1 to 5 players, I think, total. Legendary Encounters, an alien deck building game. If you ever wanted to know what a deck builder can really do, this is definitely one to have a look at. The tension is high, it is always a close game, and when you get to that point where you're doing 10 points of damage at a turn, and you turn over the next card in the deck and it's the Alien Queen who's on 12 points of damage, and you need to try and generate those resources multiple times in a row, it is a hard fight. But when you win, it is oh so sweet and oh so beautiful and wonderful to watch. The artwork in this game, I will mention, is not suitable for kids. It is comic book style, but it is incredibly graphic by varying artists as well. So there are the Wound deck. The The wound deck on itself is pretty spectacular. It basically is a series of bloody messes. So just be forewarned about that. I highly recommend it. The reason it's not higher on this list is because there's a couple of games that just encompass something a little bit more from what a deck builder could potentially be, but it is definitely one that I will continue to get out onto the table time and time again. And we'll move on to number 2. Okay, so my number 2 and my number 1 are very similar. They're from the same universe, as it were. And I don't think I've talked about them yet, but if I have, I'm sorry, I've made a spoiler here. Now, the reason this is number 2 and not number 1, even though I do think it is the better of the 2 games, that will become apparent when I get to explaining a bit more about it. So my number 2 deck builder is Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated, excuse me. This is a legacy game, which I'm very much in love with at the moment. It is a deck builder, it is Clank, but it's a legacy game, and there's bits that tie in to all the different Clanks that are out there as well. But the reason it's my number 2, as much as I love the story and everything else, it is limited. Once you reach the end of that campaign, you probably still bring it out once or twice more again, but it's not... It literally becomes a custom version of Clank. There's nothing unique about it at that point. I mean, obviously it's unique because it's your own version of the story. But the reason it's not number 1 is because it is finite. You can get an add-on pack that allows you to have minis that you move around the board. The board is absolutely gorgeous. There is heaps of stickers and things you can add on to really customize the experience. Each player has their own core deck box that keeps cards in there from game to game. So resources you earn might come back to haunt you or hinder you or help you. You just don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, once that runs out, you've got a hero with a core deck that doesn't change. And I think that... again, that finite element where you finish the campaign. While it's great up until that point, I think once that happens, it sort of becomes and spends more time on the shelf, which is why it's just not my number 1. Having said that, the story elements, the comedy on the card, the flavor text is all absolutely gorgeous. The artwork is very cartoony, very tongue-in-cheek, and I think the rule book and the way it's written and the way the core rules change over time as you add more elements to the storybook and to the rule book itself, it's fantastic, and the component quality is absolutely outstanding as well. Definitely worth a look. If you've got someone who's got a copy, you can jump in. You don't have to know the entire story. You can just jump in for 1 or 2 games as well, but definitely worth playing through the entire campaign. You'll knock it over, I think, in about 14 games, which is still quite a lot of play. But I think, again, just that finite element, just for me, it's just not quite enough for my money. Which leads me to number 1. Okay, so having said all that, my number 1 is, of course, Clank, a deck building adventure. I absolutely love this game. It takes everything a deck builder that has and amps it up to an absolute 11 out of 10. The board is fantastic. The artwork is great. It's tongue-in-cheek without being too crazy. It's easy enough to understand by junior gamers as well, in terms of all I have to do is understand the symbols and what they mean rather than reading the art on the cards, but that is there if you want to read all the flavor text as well. The beauty of this is you've got the deck building mechanic that is then made all the more wonderful by the Clank mechanic. So if you have cards in your hand that give you the Clank penalty, you add the Clank to the bag, and then when the dragon attacks, the more noise you make, the more likely the dragon is going to attack you and take you out. It is fantastic. The other element of this is if you're playing really super competitive, you can race into the dungeon, grab an artifact, get out of there, and end the game or start the end game process for the other players. And if they get caught in the dungeon, they score absolutely 0 points. The replayability is fantastic because the board is different every time with all the different secrets that you can place out on the board. the deck itself, your decks get built differently because obviously the market's going to be different every game. The way people acquire cards and their different strategies is going to be different every game. And I think the artwork on the cards I've already talked about. The quality of this production is amazing as well. It still stands up to the test of time, even by today's standards. It's been around for a while. There's a couple of expansions that are out now as well, including the Sunken Dungeon, where parts of the dungeon are flooded and you've got to make your way through. It's just the not just the production, but the story elements, and the fact that you effectively make your own story as you play through Clank. It's just absolutely outstanding. And if you haven't played Clank, what are you doing watching this video? Find someone who's got a copy or go buy one. Trust me, you'll love it. It is absolutely fantastic. It is definitely my favorite deck builder of all time. Again, I am just one person and these are my opinions. So if you have other options and other ideas, please by all means pop them in the comments below. Maybe there's something I haven't experienced. I will go through a couple of honourable mentions as well. Honourable mentions, Renegade, which is where you play hackers that are trying to access a mainframe and stop it from destroying the Earth. The other Legendary Encounters games, there's quite a few available. Predator is fantastic. That is specifically, or can be cooperative, but then you can play as the humans trying to defeat the predators, but you can play as the predators going on a hunt, and that is fantastic as well. If it was a game based solely on that element, it may have made the list, but the cooperative is just not as much thought has gone into it. Legendary Encounters Buffy is quite good as well. Legendary Encounters Firefly, they're all great quality games. There's a Bond one out now as well, James Bond, which is great. Hogwarts Deck Builder, there is a 2-player variant, Defense Against the Dark Arts, which is great. The OP's also just done Toy Story Obstacles and Adventures, which is a cooperative deck builder as well. Harry Potter, designed for kids, fantastic, great scaling, but because it's effectively a reskinning, it's not on this list. There are some other ones out there, I'm sure, that are some great deck builders as well. If there is anything I've missed, please by all means pop it in the comments below. But otherwise, my number one top deck builder once again is Clank. And may all your games be great. Make sure you click like, subscribe, follow along, and by all means make some requests, and we'll see you back at the table very, very soon. Bye for now.